Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Bedford Township Board of Zoning Appeals regular meeting for August 6th. We'll go through the introduction of members and representatives. I'll start with Jake.
Jake Lake.
Rick Steiner, Township Board.
Bob Potter.
George Welling, citizen at large.
Tom Zebek.
Jody Rector, Planning and Zoning.
Dennis Kohler, Building Inspector.
Phil Goldsmith, Township Attorney.
Karen Kincaid, Planning and Zoning.
Thank you. I'd like everybody to stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Karen, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Lake?
Here.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Zebek?
Here.
Mr. Welling?
Yes.
Mr. Potter?
Here.
All present.
Okay. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
Motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion approved. The minutes for last meeting, hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at them. Could I get a motion to approve those?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes of the July 10th meeting.
I'll second that one.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion approved.
I abstained as I was absent from that meeting.
Thank you. Motion carried, motion approved. Thank you. Under new business, our first variance request is appeal of Arnold Jennings on Consier Road. I'd like to have a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Alrighty. Let's see. Karen, would you like to read the analysis?
Yes, this request is for a 120 plus or minus foot frontage variance, a 210 plus or minus foot frontage variance, and a 4 plus or minus area acre variance per section 400, 1800 schedule of regulations in an agricultural zoning district on land described as 5802-020-00115, otherwise known as 2806 Consier Road. The existing parcel consists of approximately 10 plus or minus acres with 330 feet of frontage on Consier Road. The applicant is seeking to split the 10 plus or minus acre parcel into 2 parcels in an agricultural zoning district. Per section 400, 1800 schedule of regulations, a minimum of 5 acres and 330 feet of frontage is required. On Consier Road, with 9 plus or minus acres, thus required, whoops, I missed this line, I'm sorry. The applicant has proposed 1 resulting parcel with the existing home as maintaining 210 feet of frontage on Consier Road with 10 plus or minus acres, thus requiring a 120-foot frontage variance, while the remaining portion of 1 plus or minus acre with 120 feet of frontage on Consier Road will be split off, thus requiring a 210-foot frontage variance and a 4-acre variance. The applicant has stated he and his wife are aging and should this request be granted, they would be able to build on the 1-acre parcel and continue to reside in the area. Should the variance request be granted, the variance required are a 120-foot frontage variance, a 210-foot frontage variance, a 4-acre area variance, and at this time, no letters of cause of objection have been received. However, the applicant has applied 4 letters of no objection. As well, at your seat this evening, upon request, you'll have a 2-sided. This pertains to this particular. We went through the yellow, of course, on the south side of Consier. Those are residentially zoned. That's a residential zoning district. On the north side is agricultural. We did go through and provide the frontages of the parcels on to the west and the east of the existing parcel to show that there is a varying degree of sizes of lots in that area.
All right, thank you. Would the applicant care to approach the podium and state your name and address?
Good evening. My name is Arnold Jennings. I live at 2806 Consier Road.
And is there anything you'd like to add to what?
Well, there is. I've got something that I'd like to read to you that I've prepared, and then obviously I'd be happy to take any questions from any of you.
Okay.
My wife and I built our home in 1993 when we had our 4 boys at home. We are now in our 70s and would like to downsize. We love the area and our neighbors and would like to remain in the area. We are requesting a variance allowing us to build on a 1-acre parcel. There are 29 parcels on Consier Road on the north side, which is all agricultural, between Secor and Douglas. Of these 29, 11 of them are the same size or smaller than what we are asking for. Of the 29, 24 have less frontage than the ag zoning calls for. So there's only 4 parcels of land in a 1-mile area that even meet the requirements for what the zoning calls for. A few years ago, a home was built about halfway down, and it only had 23 foot of frontage, and it went back and they built on a 1.17 acre parcel. The mile from Secor to Douglas Road on the north side truly doesn't reflect agricultural usage. The fact is, on the north side, there are more homes in ag district in a 1-mile area than there are on the south side in the residential area. I've talked to any affected property owners, supplied you with letters where they had no objection to this being done. A use variance, which can be allowed, allows that the use would not alter the essential character of the area. And we don't feel that what we're asking for alters that essential or that character anywhere in that mile district. So both my wife and I feel that this is a reasonable request based on what is in that mile area. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Okay. Do any of the board members have questions for the applicant? Yes, Rick?
Just a quick question, Mr. Jennings. With regard to the zoning, obviously all these homes are on parcels that are much smaller. So when the zoning was put into place, these parcels were already divided according to these dimensions already, prior to zoning, correct?
Yes.
So that's what's really driving more of this, is the fact that all these properties were split long before the zoning went into effect. So in essence, we're looking at all these smaller parcels, but yet they're still put into ag. I look at this property, and when I look at it, or actually almost all these properties, you look at it and say ag, okay, I understand that's what it was zoned as, but there's nobody in there going to be farming with a tractor and building, planting crops and things like that. So I think this one is fairly straightforward in the request. But you're not allowed to say that you're in your 70s. You look like you did 20 years ago, so you can't say that.
Well, you know, I've been very fortunate. My mom just passed away a couple of weeks ago, and she would have been 101 this coming Sunday, so that might have something to do with it. I don't know.
But anyway, again, I don't have a problem with this, and to me, it's fairly obvious, but other board members may look at it differently.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I move that we close the public hearing.
Okay. Well, let's see, is it,
If there's anybody else.
yeah, is there anybody, any other person in the audience would like to?
I apologize.
Yeah, I would have forgot about that too.
Hi,
Hi,
Patty
Patty.
Lyden. We live at 2740 Consier, and we own the property at 2800 Consier, which are the two properties immediately to the east of Arnie's property, and we have absolutely no objection. We feel it fits the character of the neighborhood, and we approve.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
I move that we close the public hearing.
Second?
Okay, we have, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, public hearing is closed. Are there any questions or comments now from the board? Yes, George.
Been down that road a couple of times, even been by his house, and I cannot see how this would actually affect how the whole road looks. Period. I think it's gonna be just as consistent. That's it.
Comment.
Yes, Jake.
Yeah, I agree with George. It's consistent with the opposite side of the road of Consier, zone residential. The three properties to the west actually looks to be the same type of situation we're trying to do here, very similar to it. And there's no objections from the neighborhood. I think it keeps in conjunction with what's going on Consier there. And the other properties, granted, they were grandfathered in, but it's already there, it's consistent.
Do I hear a motion in that? Yes, correct.
I make a motion for property 5802-020-001-15, otherwise known as 2806 Consier Road. Motion to approve the 120-foot frontage variance on one parcel, a 210-foot frontage variance on the second parcel, and a 4-acre plus or minus area variance on a second parcel. Reason being that, number one, I understand the applicant wishing to downsize. It makes it more difficult to maintain properties. I said at my age, I'm 1 or 2 years younger than the applicant, and I said I wouldn't want to be taking care of, 5 acres anymore even. It is very consistent with the surrounding properties. Zoning went into effect after these parcels were originally split. Thus, some of these parcels have also been granted similar cutouts of properties within the large 5-acre plus agricultural district. The zoning and the parcels on the south side of Consier Road are all residential. And what the applicant is planning to do is very consistent with all of the surrounding homes on both sides of the road.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Tom.
Rick, I noticed on the variance request under master plan designation, this is designated suburban residential by the master plan. So, and that's the most recent, so it also is consistent with the idea of the master plan.
Is that a friendly amendment request?
If you want it, I don't think you need it, but I
Well,
just noticed that
let's add that into
to the
the
motion.
motion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Now you have to second it.
Well, I'll second that.
okay. Before we vote, is there, Phil, is there a,
Practical difficulty.
yes, is there a practical difficulty that was mentioned in Rick's or enough of one that, what we need?
I think the basis of his motion, the several bullet points that he hit upon
Okay.
establishes a practical difficulty. Tom's statement is important too, because there's been recognition in the preparation of the Township Master Land Use Plan that this particular property has been used residentially for many years. And I think that's why the Planning Commission designated it as suburban residential in recognition of the use that's been occurring for many, many years. So I think all the other items or the bullet points that Mr. Steiner mentioned in his motion more than fulfill the requirement of a practical difficulty.
All righty, thank you.
You're welcome.
Karen, are we ready for the roll?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Zebek?
Aye.
Mr. Welling?
Aye.
Mr. Lake?
Yes.
Mr. Potter?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
Accept our condolences too.
Pardon?
No. I was gonna say something.
Okay, the second item on our agenda is the appeal of Brian and Jennifer Hudak. Did I, pretty close on that? Pretty close. Hudak, okay, thank you. 3093 West Erie Temperance, requesting a .9 plus or minus area variance to allow horses in an ag district. Like to, if someone would give me a motion to open the public hearing?
Make a motion, we open the public hearing.
Thank you.
Second.
Support? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Karen, would you please read the analysis?
Yes, again, the applicant is seeking a .9 plus or minus acre area variance on a 4.1 acre parcel to allow horses in an agricultural zoning district. Per section 400.901.2, principal uses permitted within an agricultural district states, private stables such as an accessory use, subject to the following conditions. The lot shall be not less than 5 acres. There should be no excessive noise or obnoxious odors, flies, or other nuisances caused by the keeping of any horses. All horses must be kept confined within a fenced area when not being ridden, under harness, or when not in their building, pen, run, corral, or other structure or permanent area. The applicant has submitted a plot plan indicating the location of the barn and an area for pasture. As the use is permitted by ordinance, there is no required site plan review for this request. However, the applicant has provided all setbacks and dimensions on the submitted plot plan. As there is no indication on the setback proposed for the fencing around the pasture area from the neighboring east side property line, the board may want to see clarification as a building permit is not required for fencing. In the submitted letter, the applicant has stated they currently are boarding their horse and it has become cost prohibitive and are looking to move the horse to their property. The applicant has also stated they do not intend to have more than 2 horses on the property. At this time, no letters or calls of objection have been received. However, the applicant has applied the planning department with 2 letters of no objection. Should the variance request be granted, the board may attach thereto such conditions regarding the location, character, and other features of the proposed use as it may deem reasonable in furtherance of the purpose of this ordinance.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to approach the bench, approach the podium, and if you have anything to add to that, or in case we have any questions for you? Certainly. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Brian Hudak, 3093 West Erie Road.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything to add to what Karen?
Just the understandably compelling reason for doing this is my wife would like her horse to come home. And I would like to stay in the same home.
I thought you were going to say married.
We have a lot of power here.
You have two rulers.
That is a practical difficulty.
That's what I thought.
Understood. Are there, do any of the board members have a question for the applicant?
I have no questions.
George, Tom, Rick?
Mr. Potter?
Yes.
Just real quick for Ms. Kincaid. I believe we've had a couple other instances. I know each case has to, have its own merits, but I believe we've had a couple other ones, small parcels with limited number of horses. Similar, haven't we?
To answer your question, yes, and that's why the last paragraph was put in, if you have limited size. Agricultural does not restrict, however residential does. I know in the past, reasonable restrictions, limiting, say for instance, the number of horses, so we don't exceed what might be recommended by the cooperative extension, or something of that nature, which is left up to the board to make a determination.
Thank you.
So you're,
Their recommendation is 1 horse per 2 acres. For every 2 acres, 1 horse, the cooperative extension.
under ag?
Under res.
Under residential, under ag, it's not, but because of the acreage being reduced, the applicant has stated they want no more than 2 horses, so.
Okay.
You might ask the applicant if that's a condition that they can live with, if it was limited as a condition to 2 horses.
It was on the letter.
We're seeing it, yes.
On the, yeah, on the letter, it indicated that you don't have any plans for more than 2, but is that, as Phil indicated, is that a condition you could live with?
Absolutely.
If we stipulated something on there that there's a limit of 2?
Yeah.
I don't have any other questions, Mr. Potter.
Pardon me?
I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Anybody else? Oh, is there anybody else in the audience on this particular? Okay.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, board members. Do you have any?
I'm not opposed, but I'm having a tough time trying to come up with the words to put a motion forward.
Practical. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, yep,
Cost prohibitive issues?
yes.
I'm not sure that's a, or is that?
That Mr. Goldsmith could answer that one. The comment was brought up about a cost prohibitive issue of keeping a horse and boarding elsewhere. And of course, you'd have to, drive to your horse at another location as well. As we all know, everybody's budgets are tight these days, so is that a practical difficulty that could be used from an expense standpoint that they would incur to keep going off-site to board?
I would stay away from this, from that.
Okay.
Because generally speaking, economic factors do not provide a sufficient basis for practical difficulty, but how about this? This is an agriculturally zoned piece of property. The use that is being requested is a principal permitted use in ag property, the keeping of livestock, agricultural related production, things of that nature. So they're there on site, they live there, therefore they will be the caretakers of the horse or 2 horses on site if they have to. So the practical difficulty is that it is a, generally speaking, any agricultural pursuit that is recognized by the state of Michigan as a commercial type pursuit or production of agricultural products is a principal permitted use. So this would not be dissimilar from those types of uses. We just have a situation where the area is not quite what our ordinance requires. So being that it's a permitted use, being that it's an agricultural district, and being that I anticipate this board will place a reasonable condition that there will be no more than 2 horses, and that this will not be a commercial stable, that it'll be a stable for the use of the residents' own horses. I think all of that establishes sufficient practical difficulty to, if the board is so inclined, to allow the variance.
One of the things to note too is the property itself, it's already 4.1 acres plus or minus, so it's already less than ag would have been. Yet in residential will allow horses per acres. So if you're comparing apples, well, the horse likes apples. Let's do carrots to carrots. They like those too. But if we're comparing those, it's very interesting how the ordinance does state that, and I understand that. Of course, you wouldn't want a commercial use. But yet, if we can allow 2 horses on 4 acres if it happened to be residential, to me, that's almost a hardship in itself, because we allow it over here in a residential zoning, but not over here in an ag zoning.
You have to have 10 acres in residential.
Okay, 10.
You have to have
It's
10 in
just a-
residential.
It's
but-
just that the
They
acres
wouldn't allow
per
more than
horse.
5
Okay.
horses.
Yeah, and the reason for that, having more acreage in a residential, is because typically residential areas are more densely populated, so
Right.
that would give additional area to buffer the use from the neighbors, where people wouldn't necessarily expect agricultural pursuits to take place in a residential zoning district, but in an ag district, the expectation is there may be some sort of agricultural pursuit. So, so I think with that, and on this basis, and with the condition that the board would impose, that satisfies the practical difficulty requirement.
I think I'm ready to make a motion then. I will make a motion that we allow the .9 plus or minus acre variance on a 4.1 acre parcel to allow horses in an agricultural zone district, for the practical difficulty that allowing livestock in a agricultural zone is permissible under Michigan law. It is a limitation by Bedford Township ordinance of less than 5 acres. Under the consideration that they allow no more than 2 horses on the property, and it is not used for commercial use.
Support.
Okay. And we have,
Mr. Potter?
yes. Yes, sir.
Just a quick comment. I'm thinking maybe of just a friendly amendment. Granted, it's part of ordinances and everything, but might want to just mention about how, no excessive noises, no obnoxious odors, flies and et cetera. You may just want to add that in, just as a friendly amendment too.
That'd be items B and C from
Correct.
section 400,
Correct.
901.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make that
Provided
amendment.
that all the requirements of the ordinance are
Are met.
adhered to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll amend that. I forgot who gave me
I'm
some.
good with that.
Okay.
Okay. We have a motion and support. Karen, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Lake?
Yes.
Mr. Zebek?
Yes.
Mr. Welling?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Potter?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Mr. Hudak, you get to live there a little longer.
If you buy, yeah.
Good ice cream for everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, and then the next item on our agenda is the appeal of Craig Benor, 2837 Luna Pier Road, requesting a variance on property on East Dean Road. Let's see, and like a motion to open that public hearing?
Motion to open the public hearing?
Support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Alrighty, public hearing is open. Karen, would you please read the analysis on that request?
Yes. The existing parcel consists of approximately 39 plus or minus acres with 1,110.31 feet of frontage on East Dean Road. The applicant is seeking to split the 39 plus or minus acre parcel into two parcels in an agricultural zoning district. Per section 400.1800 Schedule of Regulations, a minimum of 5 acres and 330 feet of frontage is required. The remaining parcel would maintain 909 feet plus or minus feet of frontage and 37.53 plus or minus acres, which meets the requirements of the ordinance. However, the second proposed parcel to be created would have 202 feet of frontage and 1.47 acres, which will include the existing dwelling and 5 existing accessory buildings, thus requiring the 128 plus or minus frontage variance and the 3.53 plus or minus area variance. We have this broken down because it's probably going to take a little bit of review. Per section 400.1903 accessory buildings, a parcel with more than 2,100,720 square feet, or 0.5 acres, is allowed a maximum of 2,500 square feet of total accessory building area, and a maximum number of accessory buildings allowed is 2. Therefore, variances to allow an additional 2,028 square foot area of all buildings and to allow 3 additional existing accessory buildings to remain is required. In reviewing the plot plan with the building official, Dennis Kohler, it was determined buildings A, B, and C comply with the ordinance for setbacks and height requirements. However, buildings D and E will require a 3-foot building-to-building setback, where 10 feet is required, and building E requires a 2-foot height variance, as the maximum height of a building permitted is 14 feet. In addition to the previously identified required variances, a 20-foot front yard setback is required for the existing home. It should be noted that this is an existing encroachment and not being newly created with this application. The applicant has indicated in his submitted letter the proposed variance requests would allow him the potential to sell the home, since his primary interest when he purchased the property was to obtain additional farmland adjacent to his existing farm property to the south. The applicant has stated it is his intent to preserve the farmland. However, he has no personal use for the home or existing accessory buildings. Should the variance request be granted, the variances required are 128 feet frontage variance, 3.53 plus or minus acreage variance, 20 feet plus or minus front yard setback variance, 2,028 square foot area variance for existing accessory buildings, a variance to allow 3 additional accessory buildings, 3 plus or minus foot building-to-building setback variance between building D and E, and 2 plus or minus foot height variance on building E. At this time, no letters or calls of the objection have been received. I'd like to direct you to the aerial. Might give you a little bit better perspective. You can see the subject parcel. The dashed line is the area that they would like to split off, and that's the parcel that would require the variances. The remainder to the west, there's some frontage, and to the east is the larger parcel that's currently being farmed. You can see as well to the south of that, the adjacent property, the dashed line identifies the area that the applicant also owns. So they would continue to farm their own plus the subject area. If you take a look at the pictures, it does look, the home is to the next page, the existing home, and he has also provided us pictures of the existing barns on site. So he's trying to preserve the farmland that exists while splitting off the home with the existing buildings. The applicant explained that he has no use for the existing farm, barns, or buildings, as he already has those available to him on other properties he owns. So, and if you
Thank
have
you.
any questions, you can, this particular map here identifies the buildings, what setbacks are required, and Dennis Kohler can probably go over that. Okay.
Would the applicant care to approach the podium and
Sure. I don't know what you guys have and what you don't have. I got
oodles of stuff?
That's got the signatures.
Oh,
Name and address, please, for the
It's
record.
Craig Benor, 2837 Lunapier Road, Erie, Michigan. I own the property of 309 East Dean Temperance that we're having this meeting about.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
if I
Yes.
may, Mr. Chair. The applicant did provide us with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 letters of no objection.
Okay, and that's people up and down Dean?
We didn't have an opportunity, but I am assuming it's probably
Yes.
neighbors.
Mhm, okay. Any of the board members have any questions for the applicant?
I'd just like to say that this, the area has been in the family, the Steele family, and I'm not disrupting, not going no, changing anything that's been for generations.
Mhm.
You know, as far as yard, buildings and that. You know, I just, everybody I've talked to on selling and buying the property does not want 5 acres. You know, they want it like they see it. They want the cornfield to be farmed, and they would like the buildings in the yard. And that's the experience I've had in the last 2 years.
Well, personally, I like the farmland preservation, and also the properties up and down that part of Dean Road are similar sized. I mean,
Right.
there's quite a variation of different size parcels with homes on them. Are there any questions?
Not for the.
Anyone else in the audience have any comments?
Paul, would you like to say something?
I mean, you don't have to, but if you'd like to, that's fine.
Yeah, no, that was in my family for generations. I had 8 brothers and sisters. I'm Paul Seals, 275 East Dean Road. The property was in my family for generations, and I had 8 brothers and sisters and couldn't afford to buy everybody out. So Craig was good enough to take the farm and the property because it meant something to me, and it was all our kids. But he's a good man. He's taking real good care of the ground, and that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Take a motion to close the public hearing then?
Make a motion that we close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. Board members have any comments for ourselves, or somebody would like to make a motion?
I can start with a comment.
Okay,
This one was difficult to decipher. A lot of things going on here, and I'm not sure that I completely understand it all at this point. I don't know if we want to just take it one bullet point at a time and talk through each of them.
that'd be fine.
So, the one part that I'm most confused about is I understand there are 5 outbuildings or accessory buildings, and I guess I'm just wanting more clarity on what the ordinance states versus what's going on in this particular split of property that's being proposed.
Dennis, do you want to comment on it, or you want me to?
Well, I think we can all probably try and give it a whirl. The way the ordinance is set up, it goes by acreage. So if you look at that table, it's actually included in the packet. It actually shows little square footages, and then it shows you the square foot of accessory buildings you're allowed. So then far over to the right on the table, it also tells you the number of buildings. So that's where the smaller the acreage, the smaller the square footage, the fewer buildings you're allowed, and then also your setbacks are smaller. Your heights are smaller. So larger lots get larger buildings with bigger setbacks. So this was different than working it in backwards. He had a pretty detailed area where he wanted to put the property lines, but the buildings are already there. So he could actually tear the buildings down and not request a variance. However, the buildings are in reasonably good shape. So that's where he doesn't want to tear buildings down. So the property needs a frontage and area variance, but it's truly a residential nature lot. They're not gonna really put a bunch of animals in there, so the agricultural use is getting kind of removed from the site by carving off that much property. But that's kind of the reason for the variances, the way they're worded. So we looked at the table in reverse.
Mr. Kohler, once again, I believe we're probably looking at property that was split. We probably have buildings that were built before all of the various
For
zoning
sure,
ordinances.
the
that
house
went into
was
effect.
built in 1800s, I'm
Right.
guessing.
But you can tell that,
Yeah.
that house, just by looking at it, that's definitely an older, much older home.
Yes, the house is an amazing piece of artwork, no less. You could eat off the basement floor.
That's a nice looking.
For a farmhouse, it's unbelievable.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
another thing for, I think, the board to consider in this particular case is that the applicant stated something that kind of has been ringing true in a lot of these types of similar applications, and that is people don't seem to want for residential use a 5-acre parcel. They want something smaller than that. And also the goal, or at least one of the primary goals or objectives of our agricultural zoning district is to preserve agricultural property for agricultural production. So let's just say we said, well, we'll allow this land division, but we want you to have 5 acres with it. Well, the result of that may be to take several more acres out of agricultural production, which kind of flies in the face of the goal or objective in an ag district to preserve more property for agricultural production. So Mr. Benor will continue to farm the property, at least that's what he's stated here today, and I believe that to be true. He's a farmer, farms property in Bedford and Erie. Something that Kim Leonard said when he came to speak upon the land divisions that were requested along Jackman Road, along the east side of Jackman Road, kind of made me think of what his comments were, and what his comments were, well, I'd rather not have any agricultural property taken out of agricultural production. But if you're gonna do it, make the lots smaller, because then you take less property out of agricultural production, and people who have a 5 or a 10-acre parcel don't tend to take care of it, which creates other problems. Eyesores, blight, and things of that nature. So I think in this, as Rick stated earlier, we have to measure each variance request on its own merits, but I think there's a lot of wisdom in making this lot the size that's being requested, because in fact we know that it will leave the remainder of the property in agricultural production. So those are some thoughts I had on it.
Thank you. Thank you. Tom?
You know, along with what Phil said, I believe the fact that buildings tend to be clustered was probably built years ago with the idea of having it handy, but not stealing agricultural land and consolidating all the equipment. So now it's become somewhat of an issue for a variance when it fits true to form about keeping as much ag in production as possible by clustering the buildings. So I don't have a problem at all with the fact that there's a building that needs a 3-foot plus or minus setback. That's really not that much. So I think that, like I say, runs true with what Phil said about maximum ag production by not spreading the buildings all over to maintain specific setbacks, especially if they've probably been built long before 1976.
You know, you might look at this variance request entirely different if somebody wanted to come in and just split off from property that's in ag production, split off a smaller amount. You might look at it differently, but this house and these buildings are existing. Again, another reason to look at the merits of each case independently when making a decision.
Okay. I guess the two questions I have are, you know, I don't have any problem with the split. I like the idea of preserving ag property. So we would end up with a 1-acre piece of property with a house and several buildings on it, in an ag zone district. But as Denny indicated, you really, even though it's in an ag district, it's not ag property anymore. I'm not sure if we can put something, maybe we can put something in a motion that would indicate, although it's in ag, although it's zoned ag, nothing besides residential uses can be enjoyed on that face.
I think our ordinances more or less take care of that.
Take care of that? Okay.
For instance, the last variance, you couldn't keep horses on that parcel because you have to have 5 acres even in an ag district to keep privately keep horses. So I think our ordinances more or less already cover that. There's just not enough land there anyhow to engage in an agricultural pursuit other than to use that home and that building for residential purposes.
Okay. And then the other question I have is, we've got a 1-acre piece with quite a few buildings on it. The buildings, as Denny indicated, are in pretty good shape. And I know they're too close together. There's not enough space between them and the proposed lot line and whatnot, or actually the surveyed lot line. Is there anything that we need to be concerned about if all the buildings could stay there?
Well, one thing, I guess if you wanted to place some reasonable conditions, what you wouldn't want is somebody to buy that house and those buildings and then use it for commercial purposes other than ag, such as an automotive repair center or something like that. You wouldn't, because it just doesn't fit in that area. And it's not, for one thing, it's not an allowed use even in an ag district, but it's going to be used for residential purposes. So if you wanted to give some consideration as to what the uses of those buildings could be, that you would want it to remain consistent with the nature of the neighborhood. And so you wouldn't want